Hi, everybody. Hi, and thanks for joining me on today's the third episode of the Abraham Hicks Results Show. And in this episode, we get to talk about what it's like when a loved one has transitioned into non-physical and what my experience has been, and to share the really awesome news of the experience I just had. But before I tell you the awesome news of the experience I just had, I want to share with you the really good news of the experience I had years ago. Back when I was 22 and just getting ready to graduate from college, my father had been diagnosed with, one of those things they diagnose people with. And then they end up, which is a lot of fun to talk to Abraham people about because we don't get so caught up in those things, right? Abraham has said that if you could be having the toe tag getting ready to be put on your toe, and if you wanted and believed in vibrant health, well, it could be yours. So he was diagnosed with one of those things that people have ideas about and beliefs about. And it got to the point where he was receiving hospice care in the home, which at 22, I didn't, maybe being optimistic as well as being young, I didn't quite understand what that was. I mean, I knew there were really nice people that were there to help him and to help us. And I heard words about, end of life, or maybe that's not how they put it then, but I heard words about, not resuscitating and things, but I still couldn't quite get my mind around the fact that we weren't doing treatment, like he wasn't going to get better. So somehow my father just seemed so vibrant and alive to me then and still now, that the idea of something no longer functioning in this physical world was hard for me to get my mind around. And as it turned out, through the hospice care that, and he was at home the whole time, I was the last one in the room. I was the only one in the room with him when he took his last breaths. So I know that might not on paper sound like it was a really good experience, but it really was a good experience because I'd had these ideas and fears, about what death might be like. I'd watched way too many movies and seen how, Hollywood sort of makes it, or I guess I'm attracting those, right? They have to be within inside me to be able to be shown on the big screen because it's all attraction. But I'd attracted to that point, these very dramatic, scenes. And so for me, the gift of seeing someone transition and the idea that it was just a matter of the physical container just no longer breathing, like the apparatus. And now I understand from the Abraham perspective, it's more that we're focusing, spirit and life force through our physical container and through the breath. And so when we're turning our attention to non-physical, and just like we do in our sleep, we turn our attention to non-physical, but in the death experience, turning our attention to non-physical, and then of course the spirit and the focus goes with it. So there was no longer, his body wasn't breathing. And so for a minute, I was kind of glad there was nobody else there because it was so anticlimactic, I guess is the word. It was so just, oh, okay, so that is that. That happened. He didn't take another breath in, and it had been, I realized I was breathing quite rapidly. So I'd taken in, like a little chihuahua or something. I'd taken in like several breaths and he still hadn't breathed. And then I actually started looking at the clock. This is before cell phones. I would have looked at my cell phone and timed it. And I was like, oh, okay. And then people came back in the room and gathered. But for me, that was a wonderful opportunity to then see that it wasn't so scary, that it was just seemed to be some kind of peaceful separation. And when others came back in the room, we got to say how much we loved him and cared about him. And I felt like it made a difference. I felt like that sort of went with his energy. And the thing that was kind of odd is that he seemed so alive to me that my brain couldn't reconcile the physical body not moving the way we're used to a physical body moving and breathing. I mean, even when a person is breathing lightly or maybe recovering from something and they're not really mobile or moving, there's something about the physical body, clearly, that is pulsating with life. And it was weird for me to just to be around the physical body that wasn't doing that. So then, so I didn't really stay around his physical container. I was glad to have the experience, and I had a boyfriend I was dating at the time, and he was there, and he was a source of, you know, physical comfort, lots of affection and attention. It was really nice. And then when it was time for the funeral service, the wake and the burial, like I found myself, I couldn't really be in the room where my father's physical container was in a container, was in a coffin, because again, I couldn't, my brain couldn't reconcile, is the best word I can use, that he seemed so alive to me. Why was he in this box? And how was his body not moving? Because I still felt this very alive connection. So I just decided, you know, I didn't know about Abraham then. It would be a few years before I would even know about something called the Urantia book. And if y'all are interested in, you know, how my path to Abraham, the different authors and teachers that I had along the way, just let me know. That'll be the topic of a future, I'm sure there'll be a topic of a future Tuesday video. I like these Tuesdays. They're an excuse to T3, you know, to tune in, tap in, and turn on. So where was I saying this story? Oh, so he, there, you know, I have to stay in like this separate room that has a little not guest room, but a visitor's room off to the side. And I ended up going into the side room with my friends because to be in the main room and not see him breathe, I just couldn't get my mind around that. I was, talking about it years before I got exposed to different teachers and had vocabulary and principles and themes to put to these emotions, but that's how I felt at the time. And I never really felt, I don't think I visited his grave since the burial, because I felt like I can visit with him, like he is present everywhere. It's not like, like the old days when he was in physical, where I had to call, probably on a corded phone, to his corded phone. And they kept the rotary dial ones for a long time. So he had one of those by his bed. And it's not like, it's not like that anymore. I don't have to have a specific number and a day and time to match up, because that was pre-answering machines, if you can believe that. So, so I just felt like right away, I felt like he was accessible all the time to me. So that was a pretty good experience for having gone through the transition of a loved one at a young age and a father. And I know everyone's got their own experiences and has attracted their own experiences. But for me, that I felt a little fearless. My degree was in public speaking. So some people, that's a fear of theirs. My father died. I went on for a few years, like working in sales and marketing. I think I did right out of college, but then I started doing stand-up comedy. So I did stand-up comedy. I was, it's reasonably amusing, at least to me. And I had paid gigs, and I did work New York and Florida, pretty much local to wherever I was living. Then I discovered training. So once I became a corporate trainer and seminar and workshop leader, that was the deal. But the fearlessness of having gone through that experience with my father and just realized somehow it's all okay. And even though I was the only one there, I didn't really need anyone to be there with me. And it was somehow peaceful, even though that went again, all the things I thought I'd seen in the movies and heard stories about and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that I want to pass along to you all and is advice that was given to me. And I recently got to give this advice to someone. So as part of this treatment that my father had been going through initially before hospice, they provided counseling services for him and for the family. And so, and my minor was in psychology. So I don't know what that means. Maybe it means I'm only a little crazy, because often they say people who are pursuing psychology is because they're trying to work out their own issues. So I have a degree in communications and a degree in public speaking, 2 bachelors, and I have my minor. So I'm just a little bit crazy, which to me is the perfect amount, hopefully for you too. So they had us go see a counselor. So I felt, when you're 22 and you feel you know a lot, and you do know a lot. I mean, we always really have access to everything we ever need to know. So I never fault anybody at any age for being full of themselves or feeling like they know things, because we do. I went in there kind of like, oh, I don't know, let's see what advice they have to give or what this will be like. And they gave me the advice of when it was time for my father to transition, to die. They didn't use Abraham's word croak, but that would have been a good one too. They said, whether it's, tomorrow or 10 years from now or any time in between, they said, you'll be wherever you need to be. Like you'll be wherever is best for everyone, for him, for you, for the family, but certainly the best for me. I'll be in the best place for me. And that somehow it's all sort of understood in some kind of agreement. That's not the exact words the person had used, but they were comforting to me. Hopefully they're comforting to anyone who might be going through this or have gone through this, that I really, really believe that. I believe when I heard it, it's kind of like one of those things that just resonated with me, just like the Abraham material resonates with me when I heard them say, you'll be wherever you need to be. And I trusted that because up until then, I was a little stressed about finishing my classes at school. I was just getting ready to graduate. And I didn't know about, they had some kind of clause that says you can, if a family member is dying, you can finish the rest of the semester. I mean, there's all sorts of things schools have in place to students to get through their schooling. I didn't know about any of that. And maybe that was pre-internet, so it wasn't as easy to find now, but I just trusted that when they said I'll be wherever I need to be, I just did the best I could with my schoolwork, sent letters to all my professors who were awesome, and they all let me keep my grade, the standing grade that I had, which was a pretty awesome grade. So I got to keep the grade I had in the semester and be able to just have my focus be on my father. But then when the focus was on my father, then that was kind of odd, because then I thought, should I go to the store to get some things my mother did, or should I be back at the house? Once I heard that advice, you'll be wherever you need to be, the idea not to stress out about it, that's all unfolding perfectly. If you happen to be across the country or asleep, even though you're in the same house, wherever you are is the right place. And for me, I thought, well, this is ironic. Here I'm not stressed about it, and I end up being the only one at the bedside while this happens. But we had a beautiful poster up. Well, I say we, I decorated it, but it was like a little cheerleading poster that said, we love you, in my father's eyesight. And so that was really nice. Beautiful decoration for the room and the window, the light was just coming through the window. So I love sunlight. So as you can tell by my paintings back there. So that was a really, really good experience. Now, fast forward several years to just recently with my brother, and this was the experience that I can only describe as wonderful because, well, you'll see when I share the story with you. I know that might be counterintuitive to what some people might think, or some beliefs we might have. But fortunately, at a celebration of my brother's life recently, one of the people who were at the celebration shared with me they had a similar experience with their mother. And so I didn't think I was the only one. And I hope I'm not the only one to have such a positive experience of it. And that's why I wanted to make this recording, to share this with you all so that you can either know what might have happened, well, what I think happens for all of us. What happened with my brother, I think, happens with all of us. There just may not be someone there to witness it. And so maybe for someone in the past, or maybe a situation that comes up for the future. So here we go with my brother. Now, this is just the past week, and 10 days ago. And so now I'm full up on Abraham. I go to their workshops, I go to their events, looking forward to going to a cruise. I think that will be awesome. I've been in the hot seat 7 times, and I've learned there's cooler things than being in the hot seat. The last time I saw them in Orlando, Florida, wow, I felt like the entire seminar was for me. Anything I had in my mind, let me interrupt myself. I've heard people say that before, that they felt like the entire seminar was for them. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I guess what they mean is it answered all their questions, right? Well, what it means for me when I say this, that I felt like the entire seminar was for me. If there was someone in the hot seat and I had a question in my head about something they were discussing, it was answered in the very next sentence. Like it just unfolded, like wherever my mind was and my thoughts were, I felt like completely lined up with it, and anything that came to my mind was answered. And I don't believe it's a singular thing. I certainly don't have that scarcity idea that it was only for me, that I was the only one tapped in, because it could be a lot of us, right? Maybe there were 1,000 people there. It could have been, I don't know how many would have been tapped in like that. Whatever percentage, we all can be tapped in. And then perhaps we're participating from our seats. And maybe even there's participation from people who are going to listen to it in the future. I mean, who knows? It gets a little squirrely with, the concept of time. And Abraham says this is happening on many levels, but I know for sure that I felt so like part of the show and enlivened and satisfied listening to participating in their seminar, even though I kept raising my hand to be in the hot seat. And I always approach it with, I've got something, I got this, I want to know, and I'm happy to play along. I get myself in the best mood possible. But likewise, if I'm not selected, I'm just here to play along. Hey, if me participating and being in the hot seat would be awesome and take things further, I want to play. If there's some other better combination, then it's all good. And when it felt like the entire seminar was for me, and that, Esther was just glowing and looked beautiful, I knew, I was like, I am feeling like in love at the seminar, at the workshop. I'm feeling that intoxication, that sense of well-being, that energy, and all that positive experiences. Looking at, Esther looked so beautiful, and I was in love with her, and just how she looked, and how she's, doing this and sharing this with all of us. But then everyone there was beautiful, and the nature was beautiful. It was all awesome. So there, whereas a hot seat, at least for me, has been sort of a excitement, and then ready to get in there, and then I'm in there. Then it's a little bit like kind of, okay, now that it's like has more of an arc to it, if that makes sense. That's just been my experience so far. Not to say it couldn't be completely high, plus go into the hot seat and stay high. But this last one, I was like, oh, interesting. I never really thought about there be something better than I'd experienced. I mean, I know the better it gets, but I was sort of surprised about how internally satisfying it could be with no external indicator. So with being in the hot seat before, you have that external indicator, like, yeah, I wanted it and I got it, and that's awesome. And this, I was just like, yeah, it was like a little secret for myself. I'm not a secret anymore, I'm telling you. I told some 8 people as well after that. So now, let me get a drink of water. So, because we're getting into the story. Okay. So now, years later, I get to have all this Abraham content and experience, and I see my brother, and I'm like, whoa, things had changed with his physical container, his physical appearance. And I was a little surprised by that, because I'd spoken with him on the phone, and he'd been like, yeah, it's all, I'm good. So I thought maybe my sisters were exaggerating. And then when I saw him, he reminded me of seeing my father years ago. And I thought, oh, so I must have some beliefs around this, and this might, maybe my intuition is telling me this, or I'm creating it, however that goes. But he didn't seem to be taking it too seriously. And I thought, well, all right, then who am I to, I don't want to be reactive and so urgent about his health care. He was seeing doctors, and he was getting treatments. And so I'd inquire a little bit. I started going to see him more frequently, and we set up a GoFundMe account because he'd stopped working. So we set up a GoFundMe account over the past month, so that people could donate to help offset his salary. Because the way it looked, we were looking at it going for, 6 months, and then get a transplant, and then probably another 6 months recovery. So we were looking to replace his salary for a year. And people donated, and people reached out and contacted him. He thought that was like awesome. He was blown away. He's always really worked hard for, makes me think of that, what was that song? She works hard for the money. That's not really, but he worked hard. He worked really hard, as a cook. He always just worked hard. And I talked to him about maybe he didn't have to always work so hard. Like maybe while he's recovering from the liver transplant, maybe he could go back to school, and he could, get a different degree. He's a smart guy. He could get into technology and something like that. And then he could have, be like Frank 2.0. You know, he could have a switch in careers and jobs and still be social with people, still have people that he works with and enjoys, but just be a different, less physically hard job if that's what he wanted. And he seemed to be, you know, leaning that way. So we were set up for transplant. I even gotten, people have reached out to me on Reddit. So Reddit, reddit.com. So someone had posted and asked me anything, an AMA about they'd been a living donor to someone. And I saw that, and I knew from like the inspiration I felt and from the Abraham teachings, I was inspired to act and write a comment on that. And I said, you know that I'm going to write a comment, and a living donor that wants to donate to my brother is going to reach out to me. And sure enough, that's what happened. So they wanted to see if they would be a match, and we're starting those kind of conversations. So on one hand, it was all very, I mean, hopeful in the traditional sense, right? It was moving forward with a plan and procedures and treatment and that kind of thing. But then it seemed to be, he was seeming to have some anxiety. So I wanted to soothe that. When I could, I'd visit him, you know, each week, talk to him on the phone, sometimes twice a week. I'm trying to remember now, at least once a week and sometimes twice a week. And basically he was taking care of my, our older sister. So he was supposed to be taking care of somebody else who was having some challenges and not able to take care of herself. And I was like, well, who's going to be taking care of you? We need to make sure you're cared for. So one of the last times I saw him in his house, in his apartment where he was living, I was a little concerned. And with the Abraham material, you know, in my head, I'm trying to think of, well, what do I want for him? And is it, you know, what do I want my beliefs to be? And what do I say? What story am I telling? So I just very gently brought up the idea of, you know, medical care. And he seemed to think he was okay. And I thought to myself, well, maybe that's how he's choosing to go into non-physical. Because when I left him in his house, he had his electric blanket, you know, keeping him warm. It's January, and even in Florida, it gets a little cold. So he had his electric blanket on him. And he had this eye mask that I just sort of MacGyvered with some duct tape to make sure it fit a little better, because his eyes were a little dry, and they were, he had trouble closing them all the way. It was a little uncomfortable, but once his eyes closed, then they could do their work and he'd be comfortable. And so when I left that night, we had a discussion about, you know, do you want, you know, medical care? I'd stay with him, or do you feel like going to the ER? And he was like, you know, no, I think I'm okay. I really did wonder to myself, is this him making the choice to, what did she say, to reemerge into non-physical? And I thought it didn't feel right to push him to get medical care, because he wasn't in any distress. It wasn't anything someone would need to, I don't know what to say, revive him or anything. It wasn't like he was just, a little depleted, it seemed to me, a little weak, and he'd been a little anxious. But once he got under the warm blanket, or once he, you know, got his eyes to feel a little soothed, he seemed to be much better and calm. And I thought, well, everybody, you know, they say all deaths are a suicide because we get to choose when we are reemerging into non-physical. So I said, well, that, you know, I realized that may have been it. It wasn't it, but I thought that may have been his moment to reemerge, or sometime that evening. So I just sent him, you know, of course I got to tell him I loved him and how much he meant to me. And then I head off to go to my home, which is 2 hours away. So when I spoke to my family the next day, he'd had a tough day the next day and was feeling weaker. And by Thursday, thankfully, a coworker, someone he worked with, you know, up until a month before, he'd been working at his job, that a coworker and his coworker's wife, they somehow had the wisdom. There were other people involved as well, encouraging Frank to get medical care, much like myself, saying, you know, because he wasn't in the kind of distress, or he was in his right mind. So it wasn't the kind of thing we would call for him. It just seemed like he needed to be in a place where someone could be responsive and caring for him, because remember he was caring for my sister. So there wasn't somebody there that was able to get him water or to get things for him, whatever he might need, if he wasn't feeling well enough to get them himself. But thankfully, on Thursday, a coworker and his wife had reached out to Frank, and they had come over to the apartment, and they were helping with just physical things in the apartment, as well as giving Frank the number of a nurse. And it turned out to be a hospice nurse for this wonderful facility called Vitas in Rockledge, Florida. I think they have some other locations. So at this hospice facility, they do two kinds of care. They do the care that is symptom management, which is just to get, someone might need to be there for a short time, just what it sounds like. Get your symptoms managed in a calm, quiet environment and be off and running, maybe back to your home, maybe to an assisted living, something like that. Or it's end of life care. So someone who's decided this is where I'm choosing to reemerge to non-physical. So my brother, when I got to talk to my brother on Thursday, he was waiting for that nurse to come and evaluate him and see if he met the criteria, if that would be a good fit for him. And I was like, oh, okay, so he's going to be taken care of. He's the nurse. I liked the fact that the nurse was coming to him. And then if he needed to go somewhere, they would transport him. So I felt really good about that he was, I felt getting care and getting looked after taking care of a lot of people for a long time. And while I was speaking to my brother, I was driving from like the Tampa area across these beautiful bodies of water and these bridges that just have water on either, I mean, as no bridges have water on either side, but some bridges are over land or some high rises, but these were just beautiful. So at the time I was driving over these beautiful sun bouncing off the water in Florida and talking to my brother, we got to say, I love you. And I love you with that had much more than just the, like, I love you and I'll see you later, kind of I love you. It felt like it had multiple layers on that communication. So I don't know if you saw the movie Dune. If you ever saw the movie Dune, the way they're thinking and speaking at the same time. My brother loves science fiction movies. So it was the kind of thing that came to mind, that we were saying it, but there was so much more. And it was really satisfying because I thought that maybe the last time I'm speaking to him, like if he's to the point of choosing to speak to a nurse, because he had not been, he'd be like, I'm okay. Reminds me in Monty Python when the guy is getting limbs cut off of him and he was like, it's a flesh wound, kind of reminded me of that. And my brother has an awesome sense of humor. So that would be fitting. But if he was to the point of getting evaluated by a nurse and seriously considering getting care, whatever kind of care it is, I thought, okay, he must be to the point of feeling, it's significant. I don't know how to say it, that it was significant at this point. So let me go ahead and say what there is to say. And I'm so appreciative of that moment because that was so satisfying for me to feel like I got to say it to him and I got to hear it from him. And I continued the rest of the drive just feeling as good as I possibly could. Abraham talks about there's no separation between physical and non-physical. We make too much of this death and croaking thing. And I decided to take that literally, like, let me explore that and be in the best mood I possibly can, and then take whatever action I'm inspired to take. So that's what I did. So then Thursday night, sure enough, he gets checked into the facility and they contacted me and I reached out to them. I sent him a text. I don't know if he saw it that night, but let him know that I knew he was there and that I'd be coming the next day. So they asked me to come up early in the morning, Friday morning, to sign some paperwork. Frank had put me as his power of attorney and healthcare surrogate to make decisions for him if he wasn't able to. And he had signed a DNR, so do not resuscitate. So initially when I hear that and talking to the nurse, it sounds like hospice care, the traditional way I know hospice care, which was end of life. And it wasn't until I get to the facility I learned that there's, the two options that they do. But everyone was really awesome and really helpful because I am pretty much in alignment through this whole experience. But there was a little bit of like, oh, should I come tonight? A little bit of like fear crept in. Should I come? I forget what time it was, like 9 or 10 o'clock. And it was 2 hours away. And I said, well, I'll come over, do you need me? Should I come over now? Because I'll come over now. Even though I was a little tired and wanted just a few hours sleep before going, I still had that little bit of anxiety saying, should I come now? And the nurse said, oh no, 8:30 in the morning. And that was really comforting to me because I got to take my own advice for caregivers and advice I've heard when I lived at this ashram, this wonderful ashram in Florida, their guru would say to, and then a teaching the people that live there passed on to me, you know, you be of service, you keep helping and serving people and serving others and serving the world. But remember, as you're pouring out, to drink in, you know, to take care of yourself, to do nourishing things for yourself, to take in. It fits right in with the Abraham message, right? If we're not full of ourselves, we have nothing to give anyone else. So I really appreciated that the nurse that I attracted that, the nurse to say it was okay to come in the morning. So I went out but I didn't go to sleep right away. I went out and I got like a stuffed animal for him, and I got pictures printed out so that he could have pictures in his room. And I'm thinking I'm just going to go visit, make sure everything's okay. And then I thought he was just a little weakened or a little like dehydrated is what I thought, because I don't think he'd been drinking enough water or I don't think he had much food the day before. So I thought it was kind of a basic needs situation. And once he got through the day, he would be more stabilized. And then I would go back home for a couple of days. And then if he was still in the place, I'd come back and maybe we'd be looking at getting him into an assisted living place. But it is hospice. So I thought, well, maybe not. And people can choose to check out reemerge non-physical anytime. So sometimes they just use an illness as an excuse or a path of least resistance opportunity. So I just went ahead and filled up on pictures and I forget all the silly little things I got, but stuffed animals said, you know, we love that you are loved, Frank, you are loved. And I wanted his room to feel all warm and cozy. Little did I know that place is awesome. It looks more like a house than a hospital. And when you're in the patient rooms, feel more like a guest room. And they had this interesting little sofa thing that didn't pull out, but converted over to a bed, which was actually really comfortable. And big windows with lots of sunlights coming in, but sunlights, plural. And who taught English as a second language? This girl. So sunlights, that's funny. But yeah, so sunlight coming in, and excuse me, my nose is itching a little bit. So I decide to, you know, I'm happy to go see him. I'm happy I get time with him because I thought, at any time, he could be deciding to reemerge as a non-physical. So I sleep a little bit that night and I get up and I drive really early so that there's no traffic because I want to be in the path of least resistance to get there really early. And when I first see Frank, he's sitting up and having breakfast, like lots of eggs, scrambled eggs, and waffles. So first of all, that blows my mind. You know, the fact that this place is a cute house on the outside and that I just go in, there's no like paperwork. They're just like, oh yeah, I spoke to you on the phone last night. It just seemed really easy. And I was like, oh, this is my kind of place. So I was going to say loosey-goosey, but it was just kind of just easy to go in and see him. Now I expected him to be in the bed, right? Because people who are feeling a little weakened, and the last time I saw him, he was in a recliner. And so I assumed he'd be there, but no, he's sitting up. So my mind goes, whoa, okay, maybe I have been keeping myself in the best mood I can. And now I'm attracting him sitting up and eating breakfast. And then when he speaks to me, sort of looks down, excuse me, he looks down and, you know, he's glad to see me. He says some kind of greeting like that. And then he looks down and he says, almost like he's a little confused or something. And he says, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know where I'm going. And I thought, oh my goodness. Then my brain went the other 180-degree angle, because years after my father died, I'd seen on Oprah, when Oprah was real popular, and she had somebody on about death and dying. And so I'd read a book about death and dying, and pre-internet probably, or else I would have read an article or listened to a podcast about it. And it said that when people are ready to transition, they often talk about going on a trip. And my father had, the night before my father chose to transition, he was a little anxious to get up and get his shoes because he wanted to catch train. And he hadn't walked in a week. So it was a little odd to hear him be so insistent about wanting to get his shoes. And not knowing that was an indicator, we just tried to soothe him and said, it's okay, and there'll be another train, and we'll get your shoes, and whatever we said at the time. But when my brother said this time I had an awareness about what traveling could mean. So my emotions go from first getting there. Here, I'm so proud of myself being all Abraham-y, right? But my emotions are still wherever they are. So I just try not to beat myself up about any of this, which is what I encourage you to do. So first it was, he's sitting up. Oh my goodness, this looks amazing. This rest he's gotten here is great. To whew, the other side when he's talking about traveling. So I decided to reach out to my family and have them come up and see him. And so we had to figure out some transportation and things, but we got everybody there to see him. And we had a really nice day Friday, getting to see all the family. And I thought it was an interesting perspective because, you know, sometimes you could be with family at a Thanksgiving, and if you're holding on to whatever memories of past and you're projecting them into the future, and people can get a little cranky with each other. But Frank was able, he was totally in the moment. He was like, I'm enjoying this, and you guys can talk. I'm just going to close my eyes. He was just resting. He just liked having everybody around. And so that was really awesome. I'm so glad everybody got to come, and I was happy to be there and be part of it and help that happen. And we get to speak to his doctor. So his doctor's this straight shooting guy. He had 2 doctors while he was there. And the doctor was, you know, talking about stats and kidneys. And the way the doctor spoke was, he was like, you're pretty much, you know, good to go. You know, he gave my brother maybe a 20% chance of dying in the next 3 months. So Frank and I hear that, and we're like, oh, okay, well, that's an 80% chance of living for the next 3 months. And when I first got there that morning, I wasn't sure. Like, I thought, well, he's talking about traveling. Seems a little focused in another realm. But his body, even though it was, you know, usually he's this robust guy. And, you know, when he was in his 20s, I guess he got told a lot. He looked like Richard Dreyfuss. And don't know, some of you know who that actress is, you can Google him. So when my brother was in his 20s and Richard Dreyfuss was in his 20s, they looked more alike. And that's kind of nice to be compared to looking like an actor. And yeah, never a scrawny, skinny guy. And so then now of the story, he had lost a lot of weight and just seemed older, you know, than he really was chronologically, time on the planet. So for the doctor to say, yeah, your kidneys are good, there's a lot of good indicators, and he puts it in statistics, like at first I had to like, did I really hear him correctly? Yeah, okay. So they were planning on discharge. They're like, okay, stay over the weekend. But the doctor was pretty much like, we'll plan on discharging. If home isn't appropriate because you don't have a caregiver there to help out, then we'll figure out something else, like assisted living. So that's what we were looking at. And, but the nurses seemed different. So the doctors on one hand are approaching it like the health, there's no reason for the physical container not to continue. But the nurses were sort of, I don't know, you know, nurses were I think they were trying to communicate with me, you know, you might want to have those conversations, because they even brought up the really skillful hospice nurses, first of all, do amazing jobs. They wove into the conversation, well, you know, like burial versus cremation. And my brother said, oh yeah, cremation for sure. And I said, okay, let me write that down. Cremation, he wanted the 5 containers for his ashes so that all the family members could have, he was very family oriented, and he wanted everyone to have equal amount, maybe not just to go to the mother, but to everybody. Okay, well, that crossed that off the list. So I'm so glad she inserted that question, because then that was the only thing I knew about his wishes. Because what happened during the day is or it might have been on the Saturday, at some point early on, the doctor made it clear there's 2 types of care at that facility. It's either aggressive curative care, which means we're gonna get you up and running and prescribe medications to help you heal and be more aggressive about your health, or it's end of life. And my brother had kind of weighed both of those and, you know, kind of thinking about it. And he decided he wanted to choose, he didn't want to die, is what he first said. He didn't want to die. And I wished he could have known what I know, although maybe in that situation I still might have a little residual fear about it, but that we're eternal and that there's not really any separation between physical and non-physical. But whether it was fear mixed with maybe, claiming it, like he still wanted to stay focused in this physical form. I don't know quite what it was, but he said, yeah, he wanted to pursue treatment rather than end of life. And so I'm like, okay, I'm with you. And I had spoken to Frank and saying, I'd support either way. When I described it to him so he could really understand the choices the facility was looking at for him. I said, some people, they decide they fought hard enough and long enough, and now's their time to rest and just get cared for and just go that route and just feel as good as they can as long as they can. And then there's the route where we take a more aggressive approach. And so if there's something that needs medical attention that can be helped with medicine, we go ahead and help it with medicine and move in that direction. And that would be, healing and transplant and all of that stuff. And that's when he chose, he was like, well, I can't just not do anything, I can't just die. So I was like, okay, I'm on board, because I really believe when Abraham says we could be having our toe tag put on our toe, they could be declaring us dead. And if we wanted and believed in our vibrant health, it could be ours. So I just did my best to stay as neutral as I could and supporting him in whatever he chose, because it's all perfect. And so I meditated every day, even though I stayed Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night in the facility. I meditated and I listened to Abraham and did what I would, pretty much did what I would normally, do. I felt it feels very important to maintain that. I went out and looked at the sun. I did they have 4 things that they recommend that you would do every day. So I focus on those 4 things they say to do every day. And one of them is meditation and book of positive aspects, and then acknowledging that there's source shining right at you, and then being out in nature. So you can look it up on YouTube, the 4 things that we're to do every day. That was awesome. That was at the Boca Raton workshop. I got in the hot seat, and that was an awesome, awesome workshop. And at the end of it, Abraham said, you're forever changed. And yeah, they said they don't say that often, and they don't say that, but it applied to that seminar. So that was great. But back to being with my brother and him choosing to live. So, okay, so we got people together on Saturday. He woke up on Saturday morning and said, he felt like ice cream. Was there any ice cream? And I said, we can get it, because you can get everything online, right? So there I am, the ice cream place nearby, and getting him delivered. He wanted a milkshake. So we pick out a milkshake flavor, and I'm having a malted right there with him. And a couple of people came to visit, and we're asking them if they want milkshakes. And I got the idea that to get him out in the sun, because I'm thinking either way, it's nice to be, either path he's going, it's nice for me. I would like to be outside in the sun with the breeze and I would like that. So I offered that to him. He said, yeah. So we were able to easily get him in a wheelchair, one of those fancy reclining sort of ones, and took him outside a little bit. And it was nice to see him relax in the sunshine. And it was funny because he said, oh, this view isn't very much. It's just kind of shrubs and kind of a road in Florida. But there was a better view in a different spot that was close by or on the way back to his room. And I said, oh, there's a better view that's like, looks more like a forest if you want to see that. He was like, oh, this is good. Because he was really wise being, say anywhere could be good. He was just commenting on it. Oh, But yeah, it wasn't a bad view. He was happy to be out. He was happy to be there and talking to a friend. And yeah, Saturday was another good day. He had a little bit of anxiety in the evenings and a little bit of physical, discomfort. When we get to Sunday, I'm trying to think of when the new doctor came in. So we had Friday and Saturday, we had the first doctor. And then I think it was Sunday, we got a new doctor. And this doctor is equally optimistic about Frank. I'm trying to think, is there anything chronologically? Because I'm trying to tell the story chronologically. Oh, on Friday night, I had a call scheduled to do with the Abraham Fund Group. And I thought about, well, should I be doing the call? Should I be here? He's in a place where they're really taking really excellent care of him. Did he need anything? What if he dropped? And I decided if I'm advising him to take care of himself and do what nourishes him before and while helping others, then I need to do the same thing too. And he was really, fine. What I mean by that, it wasn't anything, he he was able to call, he was able to speak, and he was able to call the nurse's station. It was just, I realized I had to deal with my own fear and my own beliefs about that, right? Like, I leave him alone, and then what happens, and how am I going to deal with that? And so I just sat there and said, which felt better. So I went but I was on the property. I just went into a quiet room where they have families, and I let the nurses know at the nursing station that I was there doing this call in case. I said, I'm completely interruptible. Frank had my number, and he could have called or texted me at any time. I had my phone with me, much like I do now. It's just occurring to me that I probably should check. There might have been, I just wanted to see if there was a Facebook message for everybody that was trying to join that hadn't been able to. Okay. So, because that happened the last time I did this. This is only the third episode. First episode was on the Abraham Fund, and I decided to go ahead and do that call. And it was because I felt it out, and it was awesome, as I was starting to say. It was awesome. I'm so glad I went ahead and did it. So I did the call for the 2 hours, and then we did question and answer. Maybe it was an hour and a half, 2 hours. And we did question and answer for like another hour and a half. And I was in the quiet room, and nobody came in. Now, when I got out of the quiet room and then was kind of going through this kitchen, they had this beautiful kitchen with food set up for the patients could get, or the families could get for the patients at any time, or the patients' families could have to enjoy. Everything from snacks, what are like, I don't know, Doritos, to healthier choices and juices and coffee. And yeah, it was just really nice facility. And a place where people could relax, like a living room area, and a place to play games or watch TV or socialize. Or there was just it was a big space like that. They had 2 small quiet rooms. That's when the nurse came to get me and say, oh, this is where you are. And I said, oh, I've been nearby. So I guess that was when we realized my brother was getting anxious at night. As soon as the light went down, then he was having a little trouble with dry eye, a couple of different things with his eyes, and which were all like a normal part of this process his body was going through. But we were trying to figure out how to, medically get around that, because if his liver was having trouble, they weren't able to give him the traditional medications. They had to give him some different medications that aren't absorbed through the liver. But so the nurse had been looking for me, and I get back and I see my brother, and first I was like, oh my God, because I don't want a hair on his head to be in a way that doesn't please him, if I can help it. So when he was, he wanted some water and he wanted some other things. And he was just, what I would come to learn is like this frustration that would happen at nighttime. So this was Friday night, and I would see it again Saturday night and then Sunday night, but we got ahead of it the next couple of nights. But I'm so glad I did that episode 1 of the call because it felt good to do it. At the end of the call, Karen Money Williams had said she felt like something wonderful was going to happen for her and for everyone on the call. And at first I listened and was like, oh, good. Yeah, I'm glad everybody will get something great. And then a few minutes later, I went, well, maybe I'm going to get something wonderful as well. Oh, yeah, that's great. I like wonderful things too. I want you to have wonderful things and me to have wonderful things. It's just so funny that I didn't think that wasn't the first thing I thought of. The first thing I thought of was everybody else on the call. So, I need to take my own advice that I'm giving to my brother as well. But that felt really good. It was a really fun call. And Karen writes later over the weekend that there were 5 significant things that were really important to her that ended up having a positive, measurable outcome. And she credits it with the time she spent focused on the call, focused on good feeling thoughts. And it was a call about, I think that one was living your dream life, and how I shared the story about how I, had this amazing experience and lived in France for 2 years and all the experiences I had along the way. And I shared pictures. So you can check that out. That is episode 1. So now back in the story with Frank. So it was Friday night. So get there, we had family. I decide to do the Zoom call. I do the Zoom call, which is really funny. The nurse was looking for me because Frank was like, she's got to be here somewhere. She didn't leave the property. And because I guess Frank wanted me to go to the store to get him some eye drops that he really liked. But the nurse didn't go into the quiet room. I think it's because energetically, it was such a positive, energetic thing, and that my brother's inner being on some kind of higher level and my inner being, somehow it all worked out, and maybe the nurse's inner being, that it was better to let it go in the flow of it. I mean, it doesn't really make sense that she would have looked in the other quiet room. There's only like 3 places where patients' families are going to be. All the rest are patient rooms. I mean, they might be outside, but I wasn't outside. The 2 quiet rooms and the kitchen area that I described. So she didn't go into the one place that I was, which is kind of weird. But I have a feeling that since it all worked out okay, and I used that, what he was wanting for me to go and do, I used that as a bouncing off place. I said, you know what? I said, I'm sorry that you had any frustration. I said to Frank, but even when he was given the medication, he was having a tough time with, and usually medication can really knock people out, including morphine, which they gave him. I said, I'm sorry you had any frustration, but we're going to use this to make sure that we do our best to get out ahead of it the next 2 nights, because, you know, this is a new experience for all of us going into this. So I was just tenacious in my idea that anything that might seem like contrast, we were going to use as a bouncing off place. And things are working out for all of us, because I felt so much good came from that call, and I felt so good, and then I could be there for him. Like it was like a way of being selfish, but I was also giving to others, but it was this really collaborative thing. And I figured we could use it to get out ahead on the next couple of nights so that it didn't become a problem. And we did a really good job at that. So I'm really proud of that. So then we're up to Saturday and the milkshakes and friends visiting and him being out in the sun, and the doctor seeing him again and pretty much saying the same things. And yeah, that was a nice day. Saturday was a nice day. And he got to watch a Jeopardy that he'd seen before, so he knew all the answers. That was kind of fun. I guess it was when the championship was going on, but on Saturday there was the reruns. So he was like, wait a minute, I feel really smart. I feel like I know all the answers. I thought that was kind of fun for him for Saturday night. When we get up on Sunday, he's got a new doctor. And the new doctor is just as, I guess, optimistic as the previous doctor. So it seemed, even though from what I'm seeing with my brother and what the nurses seem to be saying, and the nurses are a little bit indicating to me, you know, they're saying things about quality of life, even though the doctors are saying things about discharging him and figuring out a assisted living facility for him to go so he can wait and get healed. He had an infection. He needed to get healed of the infection, and then I said, we have some living donors that are interested in seeing if they're a match. And so that could happen right at the 6-month mark, because they ask that someone not be drinking alcohol at all, any alcohol, for 6 months. So that was like 4 months from now, that would be that finish line kind of thing, milestone. But then that would give us time to line up the donors and have them matched. And then they go through all sorts of testing and making sure that's something they really want to do before they go ahead with it. So so that's what the doctor is sharing with us, that's how it looks like it's going to go. And I'm realizing it's really like I could go either way with it, and probably Frank's testing it out either way. Curious how this all relates, because there's messages from both sides, like I said, the doctors and the nurses. And what I saw made me think it was more he was getting ready to transition. He seemed to be called, like when he would sleep, he was speaking to other people, seemed to be speaking to other people. You know how people talk in their sleep? He seemed to be, really engaged on some level. And he talked about traveling, and yeah, those 2 main things, seemed to me like he was feeling called to non-physical, and he was having trouble reading. So what I thought was interesting at the time and interesting now is when I'm in a dream. Okay, let me back up. So first of all, I think of this as reality, physical reality. So this is using all my senses and experiencing this to physical reality. When I sleep and when I wake up, and Abraham says we download that dream, it didn't happen all night, but we download it to ourselves. And it kind of gives us an indication of where we are vibrationally, because if it's a dream we like the feeling of, then we're probably where we want to be vibrationally. If it's a dream we don't like the feeling of, it's not where we want to be vibrationally. I'm trying to think of why was I saying that part about him dreaming? Oh yeah, because to me, once I'm telling you this, it's like I'm back in the moment of being in the room and all this going on. It's really alive for me. So when I'm in it, what I think of as a dream or downloading the dream, I often have times where I'm trying to read something or read something on my phone and I can't quite focus on it or can't quite read it. It's frustrating for me. That's exactly what was going on with Frank. So he wanted eye drops and he had, you know, he wanted to clear, he had dry eyes. And so he's trying to clear his eyes. And then there was a separate issue with like how much light was able to get into his eyes from a separate thing. But usually temporary is what the doctor said. So we were thinking that would clear up. So, but meanwhile, it was a little anxiety combined with vision problems, you know, not a very good combination. So trying to soothe, trying to soothe any of that. So with the Abraham teachings, either trying to milk and bask in the wonderful feelings of being outside and having milkshakes, and then trying to soothe any, experiences that are off-putting. So I was just trying to soothe that. But later I wondered, did my brother sort of, you know, switch between experiences? What I mean is, like, I don't know if this is how it works, or I just wonder about this. If there is this physical reality, and then there's this non-physical reality. And in the physical reality, you're paying attention here, and then sometimes non-physical, when you sleep, you're paying attention here, but we don't allow ourselves to remember it, right? And why this became a puppet show all of a sudden. But it's almost like he started giving more of his attention to non-physical reality. And so that became realer, if that's a word, right? That became realer for him than this physical reality that I'm currently focused in. So when he wasn't able to read in this physical reality, it was more like my dream state. So I wondered, pretty soon after he transitioned, after he croaked, he was just sort of focusing on non-physical, and then this became the dream state for him. And I think that's pretty awesome, because that would make it a whole lot easier to leave, right? That would make it a whole lot easier to transition if it just feels like a dream, which I think Einstein said reality is a dream, albeit a persistent one. At least he's credited with that. And I think, you know, Abraham has talked about you're creating in your dream life, and that real life we think of as real life is really more like a dream than it is reality. So I don't know, that's pretty interesting. So that was what was going on. Saturday into Sunday was trouble reading. So the Sunday night is the night that he transitions, that he croaks. Leading up to that, it was kind of a down day for us, not down emotionally, but we didn't have anyone scheduled to come visit. And we didn't have anyone scheduled to come visit. I just heard something from the Zoom, and I wondered what that meant. So I wanted to look to see if there was a chat that someone had sent to me or something. Okay, so it was just like a rest day, because the other 2 days have been kind of busy. So this was a day, I call it a rest day, but then this nurse John was there, and John was all about getting Frank up. And he was like, okay, you know, once he heard the plan. So I described it again just to check in with Frank if this is still, you know, this is what Frank had said. And I gave space for Frank to say otherwise, or to say whatever he wanted to say. But it seemed like, you know, yeah, still continue on with recuperating and all that. Then John, who's done lots of nursing and physical therapy, says, okay, well, you got to get up 3 times a day. You got to get a lung, the doctor recommended, the new doctor, who's still optimistic about his treatment, recommended a lung exerciser, because if you're sedentary for several months, there's certain things that they recommended you do to keep your body healthy enough to have the surgery, and then you're just going to continue on until you have the transplant, and then you're recovering from that, and then you're back on your feet again, literally. So John gets him up and has him sitting in a chair and doing sort of physical therapy with him. It's funny, this little things you appreciate whenever you're sort of recovering or in this physical state. Like, he was able to take my brother and walk him to the restroom, to be able to use the restroom instead of like a bedside apparatus kind of thing. And that was really nice. I really appreciate that. It was nice to see my brother walking. You know, I got to see him walk with John, but walking, you know, got to see him up and walking around. And it was also the day that Frank had asked that I go back to where he was living and get like the electric blanket that he liked, because although I had an electric blanket, he thought it was too heavy, and he wanted a different one, and he wanted some things from that he'd left, you know, because he just left sort of suddenly and wasn't feeling well when he left, so he didn't have all of his favorite things. So I went back to get those, and came back. So we spent the morning together, then I was away for a couple hours in the afternoon, and then I came back and we had the afternoon together. And now we're getting a handle on this anxiety stuff. So he had, we're getting the medicine proactively, and the nurses are there caring for him, and John goes home. It was nice seeing you, John. And to me, I felt like it was going to be a long haul. Like I thought, okay, I've been staying at this facility for several nights, Friday, Saturday, and this will be Sunday night. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to be there for a little while. Maybe Monday or Tuesday, I'll go back to my place and get some change of clothes or some other things, because I didn't know I'd be staying that long. But they had a washer dryer there. I was able to put on a couple of hospital gowns front and back and do my clothes in the laundry facility. And everyone was so nice. And I got to eat the food there. And they showed me this huge bathtub. I'm like, what? For caregivers and family members, like a huge sunken tub in this like facility type place, big private spa bathroom. I'm telling you, it was awesome. So I totally did it up with bubble bath and just enjoyed myself. I ran the tub, and then I made, checked on Frank, make sure he didn't need anything, make sure he knew where I was. And then I just went and told the nurses, and I went and sat for like, I don't know, it was like, felt like an obnoxious amount of time. It was like half an hour in a delightful bubble bath. I did that Saturday night. So Sunday night, as we're winding down, it kind of felt like the long haul, like, okay, he's probably going to be here this week, but we'll be figuring out, making plans for what's to come. And I just started I've been in the master's program at UCF for instructional design, how to design online courses. And it was continuing, the semester had started. And so I was like, okay, I need to get into there and be doing some homework, but it's online, so I can do that anywhere. So everything seemed really fine and mobile. And it'd be great if he was out surfing instead of in a hospice facility, but if this is where he was and I could be there with him, and it just seemed like this was the path we were going to be on. And I was just in for the long haul, which is what I thought it would be. And it was okay that he wasn't feeling as good as I knew he could be feeling, because I figured we were getting out ahead of it, and we were going to figure it out and get better at it. And, but yeah, Sunday night, even with all the medication, he wasn't feeling that good. And the nurse came in to check on him. And yeah, he was like, just having a conversation with me about how he felt anxious. I'm like, I know, that's a bummer. Let's see what we can do to soothe that. And he just wasn't feeling good. And they gave him morphine to sleep, and he wasn't really able to sleep. So, so I wondered, is this kind of like the restlessness I'd seen with my father? Is this kind of what happens maybe towards the end of life, when it's the focus is shifting? Is that kind of the thing? And so, and a nurse came in, very wonderful nurse, Maria, and she was, she, kind of examined him and put his covers up. And then she talked about quality of life. And she said, one of the things to think about in these difficult times is quality of life, and like extending life, but what kind of life are we extending? What is the quality of the life? And I don't remember everything she said, but I remember thinking, she is kind of telling us something. Even though the doctors have said something, and Frank has been saying he is interested in moving forward in physical form, I was like, okay. And then I thought, well, I didn't want to, for me, there was nothing really to say about end of life. I felt like I'd said everything with him. I felt like I knew his wishes. I didn't want to tip the scales for him to be like, oh, now let's talk about end of life. And now, is there anyone you want to talk to? Because I really thought at any time he could choose whatever he wants, and whatever he chooses is okay. I'm just there to feel as good as I can and to support him. And it for sure didn't feel good. It felt like I was sort of pushing the agenda for end of physical life. So the nurse said it, which I was really grateful for. So Frank could kind of take that in and process it and think about it. And then I was able to say, yeah, we want to make sure that, he feels as good as he can, as long as he can. And it was just like a nice moment, but I felt like that maybe got to Frank and maybe gave him some permission from a person that could say that. Does that make sense? Like not coming from me, because I wanted to keep options open. That's what felt better for me to do. But then she presented it. It's like having a cooperative component, right? Because don't you know, just a little while later, that's when I would get to witness his transition. So they often transfer people out of their bed into a chair, and then they make the bed, and then he was in street clothes, not street clothes, but what he was kind of, you know, I don't know, like a jogging suit or something, like relaxed clothes, home jammy kind of clothes. And so they put him in, he decided he wanted to change out of that and got into a hospital gown. And then, you know, the idea would be I would wash those, and then the next day he would get back into his, you know, jammy kind of clothes. And they were talking with him. So the bed was all nice and clean, and they were talking with him about the gown and like how to tie the gown. And Frank had very clear opinions about where he wanted the gown to be tied, because if you tie it all of them, it's uncomfortable, because he liked to be able to slip off the shoulders if he wanted to. I mean, luckily in his life he hadn't stayed in the hospitals that much, but I guess he'd stayed enough. He stayed enough that he had an opinion about how the gown is tied. So when I realized they're getting ready to transfer him from the chair, and he's going to stand up, and the back of the gown and everything is going to be, you know, moving around. And, you know, my brother and I are close, but that was something that was like, okay, you're on your own for using the, I think he told me when he needed to use the bedside facilities, he was like, yeah, you know, we're close, or I love you, but not that much. You know, this is a little private moment. So the same thing with the gown. So interestingly, I said, okay, you're going to be doing that. I'll step out here. Don't know if I said it, they heard me, or he heard me, but that was what I was doing. And that's kind of thing that had happened a few times before. So when I last saw him, he was engaged with the nurses. And when I walked out of the room, my mind went to a different subject altogether. I decided to sit down. There was a little couch and chair near to the room. And I decided just to sit down. And because I thought, you know what, it'd probably take a little while for them to do the transfer and then get him set in bed and talk with him a little bit. And I don't need to, because I'd already kind of left the room and come back when he was using a urinal thing. So I felt like I didn't want to pressure him. Anyway, it felt better to me to just be relaxed in a spot for a minute. Why stand there hovering, sort of? And my mind was on this different topic. And I'm sitting there on this. I picked up a random, you know, magazine, and a nurse swoops in and says, you better come, because your brother is, she said something. She said something like, your brother is going, or your brother is, whatever she said, I knew what she meant. And I got up and I ran, you know, kind of jogged, hurried back into the room. So it's interesting, they talk about in Death and Dying material, and some of you may know this even more than I and can quote different sources for it, that people will often wait for loved ones to leave the room to transition. And so that people will find they finally go take a nap, or they finally go take a shower, and that's when because their loved one is holding on for them, something like that. And that may have been what was happening with Frank, you know, because maybe since he'd chosen life, maybe he didn't feel like he could verbalize, you know I said I want to be in physical form, but these past couple of nights have been really rough, and I'm rethinking that. And so the process started when I was out of the room, but I came quickly into the room, and what happened was amazing, because I had a big question mark in my head. I didn't know what I was about to see. You know, sort of felt like a bunch of white noise. And I didn't expect him to be in the chair. I expected him to be in the bed. I thought they'd already transferred him, and that's where I'd be seeing him. So again, just like when I first visited him, I had a surprise of him being in the chair. Now I'm getting a surprise of him, expecting him to be in the bed and him being in the chair again. And as I can turn and get around to get a look at his face, it was the most beautiful, beautiful thing I've seen. Because up to then, his face had been a little tension and scrunched and a little, you know, not all the time, but a little discomfort. Even when he was feeling pretty good, it was like, you know, I think you all probably seen it on someone, like there's like a tension. And what I saw was none of that tension, relaxed face. And what I imagine happened, because he didn't have his glasses on, he always has his glasses on. What I imagined is they started to stand him up, and he really didn't need that much assistance, but they would have just been on the sides balancing him. But I have a feeling that the process for him of refocusing back to non-physical started when they stood him up. And maybe there was some, like, they had to sort of catch him, is what I'm thinking, and the glasses had fallen. I mean, eventually we got the glasses back. But that added to the experience so I could see his eyes. And his eyes are like mine. Let me see if I can get him. Okay, so his eyes are like this, if I'm looking at the camera. And really light blue eyes. And I know it's not really possible that, I mean, not possible the traditional way, that there could have been light. Somehow there was light both shining into his eyes and shining out of him, like out of all of him, not like in a burst, like in a diffused way, glowing, you know, that kind of thing. So it was quite breathtaking. When I say wonderful, I mean like the look in his eyes with all this light, which I can't really explain, right? It was more like this feeling, and I felt like I could see the relief in his face, what to me looked like relief and just looked beautiful and calm. And then his eyes were like, it seemed like he was looking at something really wonderful, exciting, surprise. It was like he was surprised, like, whoa. And he loves science fiction, and he loves all of that other dimension kind of thing, and mysteries and secrets, and, you know, so I got the idea that he was seeing whatever he was seeing in non-physical. Now, with all the Abraham teaching, I'm thinking he is seeing source or feeling the connection with source. But it's like I got a contact high from his releasing of resistance. And when I go see Abraham in March, that's one of the things I want to talk with him about and connect with him about, because you heard the story all the way up. I took you all the way through Friday, Saturday, Sunday, how it was kind of going this way, how the last thing, you know, the nurse had said something, but nurses had been saying that kind of thing all along. And then the next day he'd be like, I want ice cream. Okay. And he didn't seem, you know, he seemed to be sort of testing out both. And I just wanted to be okay with either. It was my goal to, I didn't want to be so quick to rush to, oh, you're talking about traveling? Oh, you're going to have end of life? Okay, now let's, like there's a checklist for end of life. Let's get all these things covered. Or you want to talk about living? Okay, let's rush to get that. I just sort of, we had like space. We were going to start making calls on Monday, and I just wanted to give it space and just be with him and be as happy as I could be. But this, I don't know what to call it, like a vision, what I saw there, it seemed to last a long time. And I was able to speak to him. So he was still seated, and they were holding him, and they were getting ready to put him, you know, lift him up. They needed an extra nurse. So they asked me to go out and call for an extra nurse. And I got another person came in right away. And with the three of them, they were able to very easily, because his weight probably went down from like 200 pounds to now his weight was maybe more like 140, something like that. I don't know. And so they were able to, and because of all their training, and I was right there, they were able to do it in such a graceful way to lay him on the clean bed. But the whole way, like I was able to speak to him and tell him how much he was loved, how much I loved him, how, you know, whatever poured out of me, it felt like everything that poured out of me was resistance free. So I'm seeing this amazing lighted vision of calm and ease and wonder and excitement. And I'm saying these things, and I felt like it was like, you know, an atomic blast of love. So if you can imagine like the, you know, all that compression, and then it gets released, and just this, but I felt like I was in the zone to get hit with this love and peace and no resistance. And Abraham, I've just been hearing them talk about resistance-free thoughts and how beautiful that can be. So even though I know part of my mind is aware that this is happening, and this is this event, and this is this croaking event, and how I might have felt in the past about a croaking event, and how I've seen it portrayed, or my experience with my father, or whatever. But that was like a very small little voice over here, because in the moment, it was just this sense of well-being. You know, Abraham has talked about people just want to get hit with a well-being stick, hit over the head with a sense of well-being. I mean, I feel like I got to experience that. So it was wonderful that that all happened perfectly, because he wasn't alone, right? He wasn't like, he could have happened it could have happened when I was away for those couple hours and getting the things, his belongings, to bring back to him. He could have decided to transition. I mean, I think he really created this really well. He could have decided to transition when I was there, but maybe I would have, if the nurse wasn't there, maybe I would have felt like doing something. He'd signed a do not resuscitate, right, when he first got there. So he didn't want extraordinary means if his body had decided to, to stop functioning. And it happened when the two nurses were there, when I had stepped out and then I come back in the room. So maybe he took that as an opportunity. I think I was neutral, but maybe I wasn't. Maybe I was more on, I want you to stay. And of course I wanted him around in physical form. Of course I wanted him around, but he has to do what's right for him. So maybe even though I think I was neutral, maybe there was more of a, come on, we can do this, we can fight this. And yeah, maybe he was like, I wrote in like an obituary form, I wrote that, I think he was just like, check please. He hung in there, caring for my sister and still thinking about other people. Even when he's in the hospice facility, he was thinking about this Philly cheesesteak that one of the nurses had talked about in the area was really awesome. And he was going to recommend it for my brother, that my brother Joe really likes Philly cheesesteak, so he should get that. Even when he's in the hospice facility, he's thinking about other people. So he had just, he'd driven the car with the gas light on, and he'd driven it. And the gas light was on for a while. And then he finally came to hospice care. And a few days later, I'm getting to witness this perfect timing. I'd stepped out of the room. My mind was on something else. I come back in just to see this happen. Like, I don't see where what I imagined was sort of some kind of toppling or the nurses catching him. Like, there wasn't anything scary for me to see. By the time I see it, they have, because I'm not really worried. I'm sure everything was always under their control, but it might have been a moment from a layperson, might have been a little scary. I didn't see any of that. Because his glasses were off, I got to see his eyes and his face and everything looking so beautiful. And then they put him gently on the bed, and I heard them say, and I put my hand on his chest. Now, my brother and I were not really touchy-feely kind of people. We're sort of an Irish Catholic family, and we were a little like, oh, okay, I'll give you a hug because you're going off to college, but I'm going to see you Christmas, so let's not get all crazy about it, kind of thing. And that's sort of how our family was. I didn't realize people had a different way of being until I was dating a guy whose family was Italian, and true to, I guess, that stereotype, maybe warmer, or at least this family was, big hugs. Even if you were just going, you came by to pick something up and you were leaving and you were going to see them later that night at dinner, kind of thing. It was like a big hug. And so I had to sort of thaw out a little bit at first in that family. I used to sort of carry things in front of me or be like, out the door, the first one out the door. And then I got used to it. And then I went to France and lived in France for a couple of years where they're not only hugging you, but they're kissing you on sides of cheeks. And I acclimated to that as well. So there was hope for me to thaw out a little bit with that. But so my brother and I were not really touchy-feely, but I had my hand, I'm looking towards his face, but really not. Now that he's laid down on the bed, his eyelids are sort of closed, whereas when he was seated, I could, see all this light and all that. And speaking to him, and then he's on the bed, and it just seemed to happen, just really well choreographed, really wonderful tribute to those nurses. And I had my hand on his chest and just speaking to him and imagining what it's like. This woman had written a book called The Afterlife of Billy Fingers. And it's about her brother that she'd lost touch with, and she finds out he had croaked, and then she ends up getting sort of channeling or getting messages from him. And it's really interesting. I really enjoyed it, about the things he was seeing and what he was experiencing. And yeah, it's a nice, I believe it's true. I believe it's true for the woman who received the information. I believe anything we can imagine can be true. That's more along the teachings of Bashar, Bashar.org, BASHAR.org, but it fits within the Abraham material as well. Like anything we can, if we want to castle or a button, it could be ours. So why wouldn't the non-physical experience be any different? And but my hand is on his chest, and I feel a warm connection. Again, I'm feeling this resistance-free, love just pushed out any fear, awkwardness, insecurity, regret. Like there's no way in my being, even to today, that I can feel any, I don't know, sense of separation, sadness, regret. Like if my mind tries to go back to a moment, maybe I should have done this, maybe I should have done that, it can't even get far down that path at all, because this infusion of this feeling just coated me somehow. It certainly lasted a long, long time that evening. So I'm still speaking with him and saying all these, you know, things, just having a moment with him. And little by little, I noticed the nurses leaving, like probably one had left pretty early on. Excuse me. And then one of the nurses put her hand on my hand and said that that was beautiful, whatever I'd been saying. She thought that was beautiful. And I thought, oh, interesting, because it just felt like normal. But remember, I'm under this influence of Source, and I'm seeing things through the eyes of Source, and it's just this awesome connection. And if you would have asked me like 30 minutes before this happened, or 15 minutes, or when I was sitting at the chair outside, if you would have asked me, so Sheila, you're here, and if your brother decides to croak or transition and you get to witness it, how would you feel? I said, oh, well, I'd be happy to be there, and I know he's not physical and there's no separation. And then if you asked me, would you be in the room with his physical container after he's transitioned? I would have said, oh, no. Yeah, I've had that experience before, and yeah, I'm certain I wouldn't be there. So, but where was I? Minutes and minutes and minutes after he supposedly had transitioned and croaked, my hand was still on his chest, and I hear the nurse saying that she's going to go get her stethoscope. And meanwhile, I'm speaking, you know, still speaking to Frank, and just a little calm, you know, whatever came to mind, saying it, just feeling good. And then she calls the time. Okay, 10:40, that's the time. Okay, all right. And then I was quiet and just sitting there with him. Still such a profound sense of well-being is still filling me up. And when I realized the nurse wants to say something to me, so I turn and I move my hand off of his chest, but I put my hand on his hand. You know, I have to reach like under the covers a little bit, put my hand skin to skin contact. Again, if you would have asked me, would I be doing any of that a few minutes before? But I felt such a sense of well-being that that was his physical container that still, you know, to me, it looked like he was just literally sleeping. You know, they talk about that, and that it looked like how he looked the past couple of nights sleeping, except sometimes he would be very still. Sometimes he'd move more, but didn't look that far off. And my hand on his hand while I spoke to the nurse a little bit and taking care of detail. Like, and I had a little thought in my head wondering, what does this nurse usually see? I said, well, I have a belief system which allows me to feel connected to him, whether, so I felt the need to explain myself. So I guess I wasn't, you know, completely intoxicated still like I was at the very beginning, but I only came out of it a little bit just to say, oh, well, you know, I have this belief system. And so I said, you don't have to worry about me. It's not like I seem fine and I'm going to crack. This is amazing. I can't believe how this was an amazing experience. I was telling her that I got to be part of this and got to thank you all for taking such good care of him. And then the next step was to call the funeral home and take care of all that stuff. But it was an amazing experience. So I stayed there for a long time. I decided to play music, played a song that came to mind. Leonard Skinner's Give Me Three Steps, because I can picture him dancing around in our family's house to give me 3 steps, mister, give me 3 steps towards the door. And so there I am playing it with his physical container in the room. I took a couple of pictures because I thought, I didn't know what happened when you send a body for cremation. And so I thought maybe there might be family members who, I remember there was a little bit of that at my father's death, like they somehow wanted to see proof, or they wanted to make sure we put a mirror to the body to make sure he wasn't breathing, even though there's no resuscitating in this situation. I just figured I'd take a couple of pictures. I could always delete them if family members didn't want them. I didn't know quite what would happen, but at least at this funeral home, when they take the body and it's going to be cremated, it's not cremated for a week, 10 days or 11 days later. And so there's time for a viewing, and if you want a public viewing, you can arrange for that. And I learned all sorts of stuff. And cost for cremation, Frank wanted it to be easy peasy and not expensive. It was like $800. It's simple, and we could pick out the containers and all that stuff. They were so wonderful on the phone. So I'm still intoxicated from this experience, and making these plans are just like, okay, I played music. Okay, I had the little stuffed animal. I put the stuffed animal by him, and then I took the stuffed animal back with me. And then the nurses at the facility were so wonderful. They said, okay, so we'll let you know when the people are here from the funeral home that they'll be taking him to the funeral home. And I said, okay. And then she said, and you can stay the night in the room if you'd like. I was going to get a hotel room because I wasn't sure what to do with myself. But I wasn't going to drive the 2 hours back to my home because I wanted to be able to see family. I hadn't told all the family members yet. So I called my mother while my brother was with her, my other brother. And I told my mother, and I called my sister. I called my husband. There was a family member who was alone, so we didn't tell her that night. I wanted to tell her the next day. And I got to tell all of them my experience, even as upset, as they were like, whoa, about the news. They were finding their way with the news. I know I made a video I haven't listened to since I made it, but I'm sure it sounds just like how it's sounding now, that it was this awesome experience. It was impossible for me to feel sad or loss or anything. And I think that is available. I think whatever I saw seems like it's a flashpoint of releasing resistance, right? That Abraham talks about. Like they say that sometimes when you see the sunset in Key West or somewhere like that, there's a flash of something. Like I think I was fortunate, or because of where my alignment was, or, I guess it's something I wanted, I attracted it. Maybe that's what I'm curious about with Abraham, to ask, is it something, my brother sort of set up, or he and I sort of set up so that I'd be able to share this with other people, that it was just so awesome. And I think it's available for all of us. I think that's how we will feel as we are transitioning from physical to non-physical, whether someone sees it or not. And I think if you have a loved one that maybe nobody was with, or maybe people just left the room, how I left the room kind of thing, and they didn't see it, doesn't mean it wasn't there. I really do believe if it was there for Frank and there for me to see, it's got to be the experience for everybody. That's what I think. I have no reason to believe otherwise. That's what releasing resistance, some feeling of that. And I got confirmation of that after the service. We had a celebration of life for Frank just this past Sunday. And we did it up with Yahtzee and scratchy tickets. And my brother just liked being in a good mood. He enjoyed feeling as good as he could. And he looked for different things. Bashar would call them permission slips, to feel good. Whether it was a science fiction movie or ancient aliens or whatever he was into, that kind of thing. Or he loved to jive. He was a good cook and he liked working. And he had the opportunity to be a fancier cook, and he decided he just wanted to be a simple breakfast cook. And he did it, and he was really good at it. And people enjoyed working with him, and employers loved having him, because no matter what he did in his spare time, he was always at work, like a machine. He was really, he was really good at it, really enjoyed it, and then really just spent time having a lot of fun. And that's what a celebration of life was as well. And it was at the celebration of life where we got to spend the first half sort of informally, and then the second half had people that started going to a church. I'm not quite remembering the name of it, but it's called like Catholic Light. It's not Unity, but I don't know. If I think of it, I'll put it in that comment somewhere. But he had started, one of the deacons said it was Catholic without the guilt, or Roman Catholic without the guilt. Anyway, whatever people find, what works for them, gives them access to who they truly are. I'm happy with that. And I'm glad to know my brother had found that, because our mother is so evangelical, religious about Catholic being the only way, that when there's a lot of different ways. And I'm glad he had found this, and seemed like he'd really enjoyed the church when he'd gone to it. And they provided over the second half of the celebration of life. And at the end, we did a raffle. We raffled away the big, crazy balloons, unicorn balloons and all this stuff. Like if it was your birthday and Frank knew you, he would get fireworks and balloons, and you get all sorts of random packages, or you might just get a really fun package just because. And so we wanted it to feel like that. And so I wanted that for his friends and family and coworkers and anyone that had been associated with him. And we had gave out these roses because he was always buying like all the women in his life. As a really wholesome, authentic guy, you know, not a player, he would give women in his life roses and appreciate them, whether they were servers he worked with or, you know, myself. Like he gave me, there's a rose thing I have over here that he gave me and said, just so I'd remember, I'd always remember that I was loved. How awesome is that? Frank is an amazing energy, amazing guy. Is, when I had needed a place to live earlier in my life, and I had 2 cats, and he took me in and took care of my cats and took care of me, a bachelor. Even though I said, it'll only be like 6 months, I'll get another job, I'll get another contract, and I'll be up on my feet. And that's all it was. It was like a very short time like that. And well, maybe it's not such a short time, but it wouldn't be, you know, forever. Maybe a weekend would be a short time. But some people had said, well, if you get rid of your cats, I can take you in. And I was like, no, it's not going to be a short time. And he was just awesome. What bachelor, living in a bachelor pad near the beach in Florida, decides to take in their little sister and her cats for a couple of months and help give them medicine when she's starting a new job? And that is totally what he did. And he's totally awesome that way. So I had people put on a little Post-it note sign, like what words came to mind when they thought of him and being Frank. And I had these, bought these little cloth flowers that said, put a little reminder on them, be Frank. So that way we can sort of keep that alive within ourselves. He was generous and he was warm, he was kind and thoughtful and loyal and just really fun loving and all these wonderful descriptive things. So if we spend our time being Frank, I think we're all going to have a pretty good life. And that's how the celebration of life. And I talked at the celebration of life and told them the story about the passing, which is croaking, which many of them had read in this online obituary that I'd written. And I said, I don't know what you expected. Hopefully you knew that I was going to be in a good mood when you get here, because, and so we didn't have a viewing of the body, just had pictures, and we made that clear to people, just pictures and music and conversation and little games. And my sister had this beautiful banana bread. Mary was awesome. My sister Mary, she swooped in and just was right there with me like a little partner in crime. She was with me at the funeral home. She was with me. She picked out all the urns for people. I was still blown, my circuits were blown from this experience. And I was like, just all is well, man. Like I was blown out. It was hard for me to like focus in, if that makes sense, like being a little intoxicated. Felt good, but it was hard to like, I was like, oh, it's a little painful. Like I didn't want to focus back in on the details of which urn I wanted. Or I could pick out the one for me, but to have to think about these 7 other, these other people, because Mary made the list a little bigger because she knew she was with Frank all the time, living in the same town as him, whereas I'd lived away a lot. So, and they were closer in age. So she really knew his wishes best, and she was awesome. So Mary, if you're watching this, awesome. Thanks, big sis. And she, and her family, her children were there, and they got to help with transportation. And with her, she helped me with decorating. Her roommate made this delicious banana bread that was one of Frank's favorite. She made sure we had water there because, I'm busy thinking about games and all this stuff. And even though it's just a couple hours, people want to have water. But wow, the celebration of life really felt like a celebration of life. And the people that were there were so receptive to it. And I said, I can't even apologize for being so happy, because this is what my experience was. And I didn't expect to feel this way. Like I'm already an optimistic, pretty happy person. If you would have asked me before he croaked, I would have said, well, I'll keep myself in the best mood I can, and I'll be in the best mood. But I would have imagined it would have been like, let's see, where would it have been on the emotional scale? I would have imagined that it would have been, maybe at content, but I don't quite know where to put on the emotional scale, but it would have been dipping down maybe to sadness, and I would have quickly gotten it back up. Like maybe I would have been angry a little bit about life or the doctor, or like I would have blamed them, or they should have started this treatment sooner. And not that there's anything wrong with that. In the Abraham Hicks emotional scale, they talk about, when you are down at feeling powerlessness, you always feel better feeling anger, and then you feel better with blame. And I'm cutting through it. But if you Google emotional scale, Abraham Hicks, if you don't already know it, then you'll see that the idea of moving through these emotions, not staying in any one of them too long until you get up to the good feeling ones like contentment and optimism and hope and joy and enthusiasm and passion and all of those, right? So you want to be able to linger in the higher ones, and you want to use the bottom ones to move ourselves up. So I have a feeling it would have been more vacillation, I guess is a way to describe it, if you were to ask me. But this experience, you know, I'm just going to say it again. It was so amazing and wonderful that it blew out, cleared the pipes with some kind of, I know Abraham says the quantum leaps don't happen or they're not advisable. This felt like it couldn't have been a quantum leap. I must have been close enough to it. And my desire for it, and my desire for him, you know, my desire for him to have a good experience in passing. And I'm just curious about some of that, how that all worked out. So hopefully I'll get my answer, whether sometime between now and the workshop in March, or I'll get it in the hot seat and I'll certainly share it with you all. But it was so awesome. And we had a really good time at his celebration of life. And it was so nice. I mean, the time went by quickly. People got to reconnect that had known each other but had not reconnected. And then then we had the more formal, but even in the more formal aspect, and thank you to Mary again, and thank you to Jerry and Terry, of course. Jerry and Terry, who really were the ones that Frank was able to listen to, and they were the ones that told him about the hospice nurse, and they arranged for the religious part of the ceremony. But even that part, oh gosh, I want to call him a minister. I think he's a minister. He wasn't the deacon, but the deacon was awesome, talking about people in recovery. And he gave me his chip because Frank was working towards having a chip. And he gave me his 3-year chip to have as that's the only time I started to cry, because I thought, wow, if that was such a sign of respect from this man who was religious man who's a recovering alcoholic, relatively public about that. And then to my brother, who had been, really didn't want to be drinking, but was drinking and wanted to be in recovery. And he, as far as I know, he was in recovery. Maybe it was just the 3 days he was in the facility. Maybe it was in the 2 months since he'd gotten some more serious information from his doctor. I don't know, but he wanted it. And I know at some point he was able to not use substances in his life. And I think that is awesome. I'm just grateful that I never got caught up in that. And that the deacon giving me the 3-year chip is just a way of showing respect for the effort and the focus that Frank had done, even during the 2-month, whatever time frame. I mean, sometimes it's almost harder when you're pivoting. It takes more effort and focus in the beginning to pivot than it might maybe 20 years down the road when you have a lot of momentum. So it just meant a lot to me to get it. And then the service, I was like, oh, that was so touching. That's the only time I sort of had, but it was like tears of appreciation for him, appreciating my brother and getting it. And that, yes, that was really important to Frank, and he got it. It was getting it. And so it was the only time there were tears. And then during the service, the minister is talking about all is well. That was his key message. Couldn't ask for a better tie-in to all the Abraham content. And I was just like, this is awesome. So all is well. He was just soothing people, all is well. And that was really nice. And then at the end of that, we did the raffle and raffled away. I asked people to get raffle tickets when they came in. And then we pulled out the tickets and called out. People got bubbles and coloring books and whatever we had sort of laying around. I was wearing a little head, what do they call those bobbly things? I was wearing one of those. I mean, that's just the sense of humor my brother had. And if there were bubbles and stuff around and a way to have a good time, that's what he would want to be doing. And so that's what we did as well in that day. And that was awesome. And it gets better. That was one of Frank's favorite expressions. I'm sure it still is, right? It gets better. Because then I was sort of the MC of the event, for lack of a better term, hostess of it. And then while we had 20 minutes to sort of gather up things and people make final conversations. And then that's when we were technically, going to be giving up we just rented it for the 2 hours. I guess I would have rented it for longer had I realized that would be an option, but it all worked out perfectly because then people migrated to 6 o'clock, 6-ish, and people migrated to a restaurant. Because I'd written in the obituary, I wouldn't be surprised if an after party broke out and people decided to continue the celebration. And that's exactly what happened. And I got to go with about 20 people to this restaurant. And we had one of those big, mylar balloons, porpoise balloon hanging up. And we were, just still talking, telling Frank stories, and they were sharing them with me. And then they were getting, to see each other. They pretty much hang out, people who pretty much see each other relatively regularly, but it was still nice for them to, there's some people that were in the group that don't usually come out. So it was really awesome. But in between the service and the dinner, someone came up to me and shared that they had had a really, like, exactly the same experience with their mother as I did with Frank. So they knew exactly what I was talking about. They said they couldn't put it in words. I said, I couldn't put it in words. I'm using the same words over and over again to describe the experience. So they said they knew exactly what I was talking about because they had experienced it, and it really gave them comfort to know that that had happened to Frank. So the fact that they'd experienced that with their mother and I experienced with Frank, that's all I need is 2 examples. I really only needed the 1 example to know that that's available for all of us, that feeling that we would have. And even if you didn't see that of a loved one, I think we can trust that that is the experience that goes on. Because then after that was over, after the flash, he pretty much just looked like he was sleeping. And then I saw pictures that my brother had taken. What is it about us and taking pictures of the physical container? But my brother, I have 2 sisters and 2 brothers. And my brother Joe had taken pictures. He was the only one that wanted to view the body, to view the physical container. And at that time they put, his glasses on him and kind of dressed him up. And Joe took pictures and asked if I wanted to see them. And I said, yeah, send them. Because I thought, let's see where I'm at vibrationally. If I was able to be there in the room with my hand on his chest and wanted to have my hand on his hand while talking to the nurse, right? Let me see if I think I'm still in that sort of all is well sort of phase. And sure enough, the pictures to me looked, I'm sure they make an effort to make the face look very serene. It looked different, but it was a very nice looking, if someone's going to have their last image. And my brother showed it to my mother, and she said, oh, it's like you said. It's like you said, he was peaceful. And so it was helpful to her to see that. So I'm glad my brother took the pictures. Because, and I had shared the story, but now she had something to look at without having to be right there or go through a lot of effort to get there to see it. So, yeah, he did look, they did a wonderful job, and it was comforting to see it, and comforting mainly for my mother to see that. And Joe seemed to enjoy getting that extra time with him. But even if you see that, and you haven't seen this well-being tsunami of intoxication of love and well-being and releasing, it just pushed out, it felt like it pushed out any resistance I had in me. I think we can trust that that has happened, and that that's what'll be in store for us. Although Abraham says that depending on where you are in your, if you have more resistance you have, the bigger jump it'll be. So maybe for my brother, with the different things he was wrestling with and where he was on the scale, maybe he had strong desire but wasn't allowing. And so maybe that's why it was a big shebang of like a, whoa, it's awesome and golden and amazing tsunami of love that I got hit with. And maybe for someone that's really steeped in Abraham material, it'll kind of be like, that's beautiful. I mean, as far as our subjective experience of it, I have no idea what the experience of anyone else watching us will be. Or I don't know where I'll be on that spectrum at the croaking time. I like to think I can be happy, healthy, happy, healthy, happy, healthy, happy, healthy, and then just decide I'm complete. And then be complete and just refocus. That's what I like to think. So I wanted to share this story with you all so you could see, I'm hoping I got a contact high from it. I'm hoping you'll get some very positive feelings about it. Regardless of wherever you are when a loved one croaks, that it's the right place. I've had pets transition and I wasn't there physically with them, but they were at the vets and I was at work. And I swear I could feel this positive emotion at the time, I imagine they transition. I just assuming from the Abraham teachings that that's what I was experiencing. Because not normally what you think you'd experience when the vet says, you know, we need to go ahead and, I'm sorry, I probably should have had a spoiler alert that I'm mentioning something about pets, because sometimes that's harder for us to deal with than losing a human person. But it just came to mind to say that I'd felt this even with a pet, but a pet you really can use to focus, and they're easy to love, and you can focus on them in such a loving way. And then I felt that through my pets. And at that time of transition, even though one I wasn't with, one I was with, but then had this interesting experience later on. I'll have to do I can do a whole separate thing on pets transitioning. But yeah, it was an awesome, awesome experience. And I still feel it now. And it's the challenge for me now is I feel very general and a little unfocused, which is why it was easier for me to tell this story chronologically, just to go through it rather than jump to that, because it's almost like it helped me kind of focus on the points to share with you and to have on this recording. And now I'm just trying to be kind to myself and do things that feel good. And I know that my focus and clarity and attention to detail will come back. It's just, I still often find myself in this happy, diffuse, all is well. I don't have to effort as much or try as hard. Gosh, I've had what I take as indicators. You know, I like when Abraham says no one else has to ever believe that their teachings or what you've come to believe. Because when I was driving to the Celebration of Life service, I was going by an airport, and there was this plane that was coming across the rows of that was their normal flight path, to go kind of across the top of traffic and to head into the, what's it called? Tarmac landing. They were coming in for a landing. And it was this big, bright yellow plane, and it had the name of the airline on it. And I'm driving to the Celebration of Life service, and it had the word Spirit, right? Spirit Airlines. So I took that. I thought, oh, that's pretty funny. You know, Frank would totally give me that indicator of Spirit. Because at first it would just caught my attention because it was close. And then I was like, Spirit, yeah, he would think that is funny to catch my attention with Spirit. So are these indicators true? Is it him? Why not? Why not believe it is a connection with him? If I really believe that we are connected, I can be expectant and look around for things. And then when I went into this fast food restaurant, they were playing a song, and I tuned into it for a second and realized it was Billy Joel's "Only the Good Die Young." And he did die relatively young. You know, he was only 59. And that seems pretty young in my family and in this country. So only the good die young. And I was like, oh, yeah, good choice. Okay, that's interesting. That's funny. He would think that is funny. And there was a couple other things. Oh, yeah, like just interesting, even more synchronicity and coincidences that I've had in my life, even more so. Like something my husband meant to tell me about this Easter bunny basket, but he didn't tell me until last night. And last night I happened to be watching this lighthearted movie called Hop about the Easter bunny. So I was watching Hop and that night, and then he meant to tell you something happened a couple of days ago, but then he tells me, and it's about an Easter bunny. So interesting coincidences. I was looking for funds to be in my account, and I was like, usually things are just there for me. And then as soon as I put it out there for the funds to be in my account, don't you know, I get an email just a few minutes later that says the funds are in my account. And so there's two things. One is that I'm using it as an opportunity to, I'm gesturing. What am I gesturing? I'm like trying to, it's like solidifying my connection with Source, or making me realize I have the connection with Source, and yeah, making me more aware of it or expecting it. That's right. It's increasing my expectations of things going well for me, because I feel like I've got my brother's my brother is in non-physical. And so, and my father and other people that care about me and knew me as a child growing up. I mean, there's so much on my side. So it has increased my expectation. And then I hadn't thought about that money. You know, I thought about it a couple of days ago, but I hadn't really thought about it. Let it go. And then I somehow got on it. Like I had this strong desire. And then I was like, because it didn't feel good to have a strong desire and not have the belief lined up with it. So it didn't feel good. So I decided, let me stop. I'm going to stop my efforts, whatever I was doing and searching and stuff like that. I'll stop. And as soon as I stopped and I checked my email, seemingly randomly, right? It loads up and, oh, don't you know, there's the information about the money. So I feel like increased expectation and then synchronicities, and it's really, 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 really nice. So he still feels very much alive to me. Like if I see things like a sense of humor, and I'm hoping for, and kindness, and me to think about being, you know, could I be warmer? Could I be more available to others? Could I be, part of making these videos is so I can be more in this physical world, because I like to spend a lot of time in theory and in the sort of, what did Abraham calls it, like escaping. And yeah, I really like the high vibration here. And then the idea of taking it and kind of putting it into physical. So I'm still looking forward to whatever that's going to, be. Right now it's making these videos and sharing information. And I really enjoyed the folks I get to talk with, and happy to do, when I do these live Zoom calls, I'm happy to take questions and answers. And I'll be doing a recording of other people's success stories that they've had living their life. And then we apply the different Abraham techniques into how we think that may have happened. And that's going to start this Saturday. So I'll be having 2 videos each week. One is going to be my success stories, and one is going to be success stories that other people have in more of a podcast format. And if you have any questions during any of those times, I'm available. If you wanted one-on-one coaching, I'm available for that too. I had someone call me. We were talking there in Australia, and we talked about something, and I just said whatever I said. You know, I'm like, it's just coming out. This is what I'm saying, not like a prepared kind of thing. And they said within 2 hours, they had received evidence that their situation, that was evident. They felt the shift right away. And then within 2 hours, they had physical manifestation that their situation had shifted, which I totally had expected. One of the things I told them was, one of the things about having your life, attracting exactly what you want in your life and attracting from other people exactly what you want, the kind of behavior you want, is you have to be prepared for the fact that no one else may realize there's been such a dramatic change. Like, let's say you had an in-law that was really nitpicky and sort of, you know, like negative. And you're like, I don't want negative. Really, all that's reflecting is our own insecurity. It's not like this person. I don't believe that this person is evil or had bad intention. It's just reflecting our own level of beliefs and insecurity is showing up in them, seeming like it's coming from another person, but since it's all about attraction, it's all us. So I look at contrast and interactions with other people as, oh, that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at vibrationally on that topic. Okay, I got it. I don't like it. I don't always like it, but I got it, that's where I'm at, and that's a reflection of it. And then I can shift my attention. I can work on other areas that are easy for me to feel good about, do all the techniques you all know about from the Abraham teachings. It's from myself, it's 90 to 95% Abraham teachings, a little bit of Bashar and some other teachers. But one of the things I found is you could have someone in your life be dramatically different to you in your experience. And yet if you ask other people around, wow, and you want to share this and say, wow, this is so great, look what's happened. From my experience, they don't even realize there's been a change. They're like, oh, that's how it always was. Or haven't you always looked amazing? Or haven't you always had a lot of money? Or haven't you? And for me, that has to do with Bashar's idea about the infinite parallel universes and how we're shifting, or it could do a lot of things. But I told this person to be prepared for a shift in their life, and they're going to want to point to it and talk to other people about it. And the other people are not necessarily going to even have a concept of what they're talking about. So talk about where my expectation was, right? My expectation for that person was all the way to it having already happened. And then they were celebrating it and wanting to have someone to celebrate with. I said, they can call me and celebrate with me, but nobody else will probably get it. And that's exactly what happened. And I was really happy for them. I'm just, if I can be a facilitator, a avenue, a permission slip that somebody uses to feel better, that is awesome. Because it also keeps me focused. The reason I do these, it keeps me focused on feeling good in the moment. And like Karen had said on the last call, she felt something good was going to happen for all of us, for her and for everyone. And then I was finally like, oh, for me too? Well, don't you know, I had that experience of wellness and well-being and release of resistance. And I still experience it physically, like not just with synchronicities and indicators, but also in the past, if I was going to sleep and I knew, because I have a very flexible schedule right now, I get to do what I like when I feel like it. I get to be very fluid about that. And it's awesome. And I'm so proud of myself for having attracted that experience, because it's really great. But there are some times during the week that I am getting up earlier than I might naturally. And so set an alarm and to get up. And in the recent past, like just a month ago, just 2 weeks ago, I would have felt tossing, turning, restless. I could feel that there's resistance. Like, I don't want to have to get up. I don't want to have to set an alarm. Because so much of my experience is, free, and I get to do what I feel like doing when I feel like doing it. That with this experience with my brother, and I didn't notice it till the next day, but I'd set my alarm and gotten up, and I was like, I'm rested, and got up, and then I noticed, wait a minute, to have improved sleep, like to feel that whatever resistance I released had released resistance and it affected a lot of other areas. It's awesome, McAwesome. So hope you enjoyed this. If you want more, I think I have a total of now 3 videos on my channel. There's more to come. So you'll get one each week that has a story about me having success, and then you'll get the stories of other people's successes, and it's all going to be so cool. For this one with my brother, I'm looking forward to learning more. What exactly was it? I have a feeling it's going to be that I kept myself as an alignment I could, that I've been taking meditation very seriously the past couple of months, like getting up, meditating, allowing time for it, not just kind of falling back to sleep with the meditation, doing it first thing in the morning. I'd gotten a little closer to their guidelines. Their guidelines are before we do anything else, maybe use the restroom, that's it. Use the restroom, have something to drink, but don't look at email, don't look at anything else. Don't really get your mind active if you can help it. And then just do the meditation and do it every day. And I use their guided meditations as an intro. And then I set a timer for about 30 minutes. So I have their guided meditation, takes about 15 minutes. And then I do another 15 minutes just listening to the sound of a fan. And they probably are going to say all of that, and that I got out ahead of it. And maybe that it was a collaborative experience between he and I. I'm trying to think of what else. I think that's what they'll say, but I will keep you posted, because for most other stories that I'll be sharing, it's a clear, like this thing has ended and it's pretty clear what it was. But this experience seems, so big and so awesome. But it could just come down to the very basic things that we're all striving to do every day and getting out ahead of it. Okay. Yeah, it feels complete for now. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. It is time to end the meeting. This is my end the meeting song. Now I'm ending the meeting. Here we go. I'm ending it for all. See you next time.